The fallout still coming in fast and furious over the FBI's raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Republicans demanding answers from the White House and the DOJ as we learn brand new details. Here they are. The FBI reportedly searched through the former First Lady Melania Trump's wardrobe and spent hours in Trump's private office, seizing about a dozen boxes on Monday. Some of the materials recovered from earlier this year included letters from Kim Jong-un and former President Obama, as well as a cocktail napkin and a birthday dinner menu. An attorney for the former president telling our own Jesse Waters, that the FBI would not let Trump's legal team keep a copy of the presented search warrant.
Our country should be terrified. I am terrified. I can tell you that he was not only working with them, he was cooperating. There was nothing to hide, and he was working in tandem, allowed them into Mar-a-Lago. And the point is, they went in when he wasn't even there and then told his attorneys to leave.
Why doesn't the president's attorney just release the warrant? They were probably handed a warrant.
Actually, my understanding from the attorneys on the ground was that they weren't given the warrant. They were allowed to see it and then taken back.
And Fox Business's Charlie Gasparino reports that Trump and his legal team will likely seek a court order to force the FBI and the Justice Department to turn over a physical copy of the search warrant, the affidavit, and a complete inventory of what was taken in the Mar-a-Lago raid. Meanwhile, there's growing speculation among Republicans that the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago could actually accelerate a Trump 2024 run for president.
I've never seen President Trump as fired up as what he was tonight. He is not deterred. And if anything, it paves the way for Donald Trump to unify the party once again and run for president.
All right. So did I miss anything?
Welcome back, by the way. And I got to say, you look great. I mean, the swelling is down. You look 10 years younger.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
I know. It's weird that when you go for one of those procedures, you have to socially distance for 10 days.
It's incredible.
It's like a strange thing. It's like a weird pandemic thing that's happening, indeed. But I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Jesse, it's true, no one is above the law. But while the silence continues from DOJ and the White House and the FBI, that it's understandable that people are suspect about what's happening here.
Yeah, Biden raided Trump's house and then went on vacation. And he took Hunter and Air Force One with him. It's crazy. I think Newsweek reported that they had a mole inside Mar-a-Lago, which doesn't surprise me. Remember, they put moles in the campaign, put moles all over the place. They probably put the mole at Fox, the FBI, is what they do. I don't even believe there was a mole. That's just like a justification to say, oh, someone told me they bought a safe. That's why we went in. Now, this archivist who started this whole drama, this guy's a total weirdo. Obama appointee said January 6th was the worst day of his life. Okay, he wasn't at the Capitol on January 6th. The archives are blocks away. Must have had a pretty nice life as a librarian. He said that he saw on television Trump leaving for Mar-a-Lago on Inauguration Day with a box. And he goes, what is in that box? And that's when this whole thing started. Now, Obama's got boxes of stuff in Chicago. Biden's got stuff at the University of Delaware. Remember, you can't see it when he got accused of rape. You can't see it, but Trump's not allowed to have a love letter from Little Rocket Man. They judge shopped, first of all, to probably the worst magistrate judge in the country. Why would you shop for a judge who worked with the Epstein team? Like, he represented the pilot that flew children to an island to get raped. Now, usually if you fly children to an island to get raped, you usually spend time in prison, but for some reason, this guy spent no time in prison because this guy they shopped to either got him a sweetheart deal, and he didn't even leak and rat out Epstein. He still got off, and he's all over social media saying, oh, I hate President Trump, I love Joe Biden. That's who they went to, and I think Judicial Watch just filed a FOIA request, so they have until Monday to explain the DOJ why they did this and show the affidavit. The surveillance video at Mar-a-Lago exists, so I think they should release that to show these guys rummaging through Melania's closet. What do you think? The president went in there and stuffed things in her undergarments and sewed documents inside of her dresses so they couldn't see it. That is absolutely crazy. I wouldn't be surprised also if they planted bugs. I mean, they did bug the campaign. They fraudulently doctored evidence to get a warrant to wiretap the campaign. I'd sweep that whole estate with a bug sweeper, whatever those things are called. You see those things on the beach or something like that. So the AG's in hiding, Biden's in hiding, and let me get this straight. Democrats are so upset about being hacked and all these sensitive materials out there, right? So Hillary gets hacked, and everybody has that. Obama's White House got hacked by Chelsea Manning, gets hacked by, who was the other guy? Snowden, releases documents everywhere. Joe Biden's son loses his laptop. That's all out there. His daughter's diary's out there for everybody to see. So that's fine. So the Democrats just like throw documents all over the world. Everybody can see it. But Trump has a letter from Kim Jong-un that they have to raid his estate over? Give me a break. Trump should have just lit everything on fire. That's what Crooked did. Crooked bleached everything and said, I'm going to destroy the personal stuff. Here's the work-related stuff. I mean, why didn't Trump do that?
Jessica, do you get the sense that Democrats are feeling some pressure for the FBI or the DOJ to at least say something about what's happened?
Well, I'm glad that we're back to using Hillary Clinton's legal birth name, Crooked Diane.
Rodham.
Rodham.
Crooked Rodham Clinton.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. I didn't say Hussein. I did not say Hussein Obama.
It's big of you. There's definitely some pressure out there. You saw Andrew Cuomo came out and said yesterday that we've got to hear about this. He's not necessarily in good stead with the party, but he is certainly a prominent Democrat. I think people generally want answers. I think everyone is unified. The reason that they want those answers are different. And Democrats are certainly looking at this and how it's been portrayed in terms of punditry and the kind of articles that have been written about this and the comments that have been made. And our heads are absolutely spinning. It's the number of mistruths and assumptions that are being projected all over television. I mean, from the idea that there was evidence that was planted, Donald Trump is now amplifying that. Eric Trump went on TV and said that Biden definitely signed off on this. I don't know if he's just tattletaling on how his father used to do things, but the Biden administration has made it clear that they found out.
Because Biden always tells the truth. Like, oh, I don't know what my son was doing with the Chinese. You believe him? You believe Biden when he says I didn't know anything? He also said he didn't know anything about what Hunter was doing.
I can't even do it because I don't want to waste time on the idea that Biden sat around and signed and said, "Oh, hey, Merrick, this is what we should be doing now."
That's not what I said.
The judge.
I'm sorry, but shouldn't he know?
He's
the president. He's in charge.
I don't know. The DOJ, they're supposed to function separately from them.
Oh,
They're supposed to be able to make
autonomous. It would be.
Okay. That's not just it. This judge, by the way, who donated to President Obama and to Jeb Bush, now he had to have his information scrubbed from the internet. He and his family have been threatened. Stuff about killing
Supreme Court justices when they could have done something about it.
As a judge,
what do you mean,
I'm shocked.
I kidding?
No, all I hear about at this table, by the
kidding.
way, is that it's only Democrats that are, crazy, unhinged, violent types. We have evidence this happened in a day, that this man is going to have to go into hiding. We heard also from the attorney who appeared on your show saying that none of Trump's attorneys were allowed to be present. Newsweek reported that Lindsey Halligan from Trump's team was present during the multi-hour search. Bad information is dangerous here. If the Trump campaign, or sorry, I shouldn't say campaign, if the Trump group team has the warrant or any information on what they see, they should release it. That burden is not on the DOJ to do it. If he's going to say that they planted something, prove it.
He's presumed innocent.
Judge,
Let me tell you
whose
something.
burden is it?
All right. Whose burden is it?
Yes.
Who drafted it?
Exactly.
Let me back up for a second. Harold yesterday, his whole defense was, tell us what was in the warrant. Tell us what was in the warrant. That was the defense of the Democrats. Well, Donald Trump didn't get a copy of that warrant. Neither did anyone on his team. I spoke to Eric Trump 10 minutes before this show. They were not allowed to get a copy of the warrant. They were not allowed to have any of the attorneys on scene there while the FBI...
What about this Lindsey Halligan?
Let me finish.
You believe Newsweek?
Wait a minute. I don't believe Newsweek, but let me make my point here. I was a judge. You decide a warrant based upon the application and the affidavit. We know that the FBI has no credibility because the FBI put in affidavits before FISA judges regarding national security that were based on lies and Trump haters who wanted to make sure that Hillary Clinton won. That same crew that called us domestic terrorists, who then lied about making sure Donald Trump wouldn't be president, we're supposed to believe them. And let me make
Christopher Wray is a Trump appointee. Christopher Wray
is as much a part of the deep state as the rest of them. Now, let me explain something about Christopher Wray did not. He was called to answer before Congress. He couldn't answer anything 2 weeks ago about what was going on in Congress in terms of what he's doing with the FBI, how he's punished any of the people, whether it was McCabe or Strzok or the rest of them. He did nothing, zero, zilch. All right? Now, let me tell you a little bit about this warrant. They can put anything they want in the warrant. It is the execution of the warrant that is filed with the court that contains what they got. Now, how did they take those boxes? Injudiciously is the word that was used. That means they took boxes. They did no inventory. We don't know what was in the box. They set it up so that they can say anything was in that box. And to go through Melania Trump's clothes, it's an outrage. This is their effort to intimidate the Trumps and make sure that the Trumps are not in a position where they can deny anything. And at the end of the day here, what we've got is a corrupt Justice Department, a corrupt FBI, based upon what has happened in the last 7 years. They've gone after Donald Trump for 7 years. They will not stop. The FBI, the DOJ, the Attorney Generals, they want him on anything. And I'm telling you, sure as I'm sitting here, the guy's going to run for president now because they pushed his buttons.
All right, I have done a great job of managing this block over time, but I want to give you time to either make fun of me or to make a comment.
Oh, no, I'll make a few comments. I have to address Jessica's point about the threats to the judge. I think that as legitimate as those threats might be, you're seeing the pivot from it's not about the raid, it's the pouncing of the right. This always happens when something happens, like, oh, well, the right is now pouncing. And that's their way of pivoting away from the actual injustice. And I do think that Jesse is right to be skeptical of everything that is coming out of these departments when you consider that all of these people believed that, number one, Trump was an existential threat. Number two, he was the next Hitler, right? So if you didn't want to try to get him off the political landscape, then you're kind of a coward, right? If you actually believe,
complicit.
Yeah, you're complicit. If you don't, so the thing is, they can't argue that he's evil and then do nothing about it, including go above the law. If I felt that there was somebody that was running for president who was Hitler, an existential threat, I would break the law. Like I would, if I could go back in time and kill Hitler. That's always the question. You would do it. So. You know, that's the idea. You can't say this about Trump and then say you're going to be below the law. They also went through Melania's closet, which is, you know, imagine if they did that with Hillary, right? They'd find one pantsuit and a server. And if they went into Dr. Jill's closet, they find an online degree and 30 cases of Prevagen. And if they went into Joe's closet, they'd find Robert Byrd. So I would argue that whatever you're talking about, it goes back to the simplicity that a lot of the things that Trump did never was by the rules, because he didn't really, like, he was outside that world. So he took this stuff home. And it's like, oh, I don't care. I got some napkins. I got a signed photo. I got some stuff from Jesse. And then it's like, oh, they want it back. And he's like, oh, it's my stuff. I can see that's how he looks at it. But the motives to go after him make me think that they do want Trump to run. And this is very reminiscent of 2015. Egg the guy on, talk about him as a joke and a threat, watch the ratings explode. Suddenly he's on Morning Joe every single day. But basically, Jeff Zucker is sucking on his toes. And then they're drooling over the guy. And then what happened? They elected him. And now their Trump derangement has created an amnesia, and they're doomed to repeat it again. Remember, this, Tyra said this last night on my show. All it took was a joke at the correspondents' dinner to get Trump to run. Yeah. What do you think this is going to do? Not only is he going to run, he's going to unite everybody behind him. That's right. Because you just did something so incredibly visual. You raided his house. Lastly, they got the ball rolling on retribution, right? Now, what do you think? You see Colbert laughing about this? Is it going to be funny when a Republican is in there and decides to go after Joe Biden? Right. But Joe Biden's been in politics for 50 years. God knows the amount of shady dealings going on in his life. They're the Sopranos with a sex addiction. So this is not a good pattern to start, to go after the previous president. But now, all bets are off. Let the pouncing begin.
Couldn't it be that he actually just did something really bad and he shouldn't have done it? You have 15 boxes carted away already, 10 to 12 this time around.
He cooperated with them.
No, he didn't. That's how
he cooperated with them.
Yelling it doesn't make it true.
Yeah, he did.
Jesse,
he sent boxes
Jesse, tonight on your show, can you please add Sandy Berger to
Thank you for cooperating.
Sandy
They
Berger.
sent a letter
Make
saying
one
thank you for
Months ago,
cooperating.
they showed.
I just want to make one point.
Yeah.
But I won't keep it to myself. It's just the Sandy Berger thing really pisses me off from 2001 when they tried to hide the fact that the Clintons actually did know about Al-Qaeda.
Exactly.
That irritates because they stuffed him down his pants and his socks, and he got probation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.